Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to be going over and showcasing my Forbidden Rite cast on critical build that I've been working on for the past couple of weeks now. I want to preface the fact that this is a build showcase, not a build guide, and therefore I'm kind of disclaiming that this build is not cheap. This build is unattainable by most of the player community, so I just want to put that out there that unless you're very rich in the game, this is a hard build to strive for. And budget options don't really come close to the premium version of the build in regards to power. But with that out of the way, I'm just going to have some good content of me running the build in the background while I kind of explain the build and how it works. So Forbidden Cast on Crit is best put a power charge stacker with the capability of stacking up to, at least in this league, up to 12 power charges in order to easily cap its critical crit strike chance, as well as stack a ton of damage based on how many power charges you have. Things such as Militant Faith with High Templar Dominus allows us to run Inner Conviction, which is increased damage per power charge, and then we get the Charge Mastery, which gives us increased damage per Endurance, Frenzy, and Power Charge. And then, of course, we're also getting Forbidden Power on the Occultist Ascendancy, which is giving us more damage per power charge, as well as getting damage per power charge on our rings, and so on and so forth. So a lot of damage stacking goes on based on how many power charges you have, which is why it's imperative to get as many max power charges as you possibly can if you want the damage to be high in this build. Apart from that, this build is also notorious for being incredibly tanky without much of a sacrifice in the avenue of damage. So it's able to utilize things like Aegis, Aurora, as well as Melding of the Flesh to give us about an 87% max elemental resistance cap, as well as gives us plenty of armor and energy shield to work with. We're also running a Watcher's Eye that gives us energy shield per enemy hit while affected by discipline, as well as some phys mitigation and mana reduction. The new Crucible trees has allowed us to run Storm Shroud and get full elemental ailment immunity for very little investment. We just take the node on the tree for the Aegis, 100% chance to avoid shock, and then we're able to just run a Storm Shroud, which makes that avoid all elemental ailments. So that's a crazy good improvement, as well as in the Crucible trees on the dagger and the shield, we're able to run 2 additional power charges, which means that Forbidden Rite in a league standpoint has been at its highest damage potential ever, with the second best in probably most likely competing was Sentinel League, because you could recombine rings and get multiple power charges per ring. So yeah, I think the last time we've had this kind of power level on a cast on crit Forbidden Rite build was in Sentinel League. And even then, back then, the Aegis melding combo was unnerfed. Melding didn't have the -4 to max elemental resistances on it. So yeah, I would say it was slightly better in Sentinel, but besides that, Crucible League has really opened up avenues for this build to thrive and prosper in. Apart from the jewels I've mentioned so far, we're also running Forbidden Flame, Flesh, Vile Bastion in order to upgrade our defenses and give us stun immunity, which is very important for any Cyclone cast on crit build. It's very important that you have stun immunity or stun reduction or stun avoidance of some form, so that your Cyclone does not get cancelled while you're channeling it. Apart from that, we're also running a couple of large cluster jewels. We're running a spell damage cluster jewel and a chaos damage cluster jewel to give us increased spell damage and increased chaos damage. In the spell damage cluster jewel, one of the major reasons we're running this over a second chaos damage jewel is for Mage Hunter, which is giving us +4% chance to block spell damage, which on this tree in particular actually gives us 8%, allowing us to basically it is allowing us to cap our spell block chance. So we have a full 75-75 on block chance. So that's very great, especially because we're running glancing blows. So we want to make sure that our block chance is as high as possible so that Not only are we refunding energy shield on block from Aegis Aurora, but we're also getting downgraded on how much damage we're taking per blocked hit from glancing blows, so we do want to make sure that we're taking full advantage of it. And then lastly, we're running a Thread of Hope, and simply so that we can get Light of Divinity and glancing blows. Since we are not running a Skin of the Lords, we're running a Skin of the Loyal Double Corrupted, we want to be able to take glancing blows on our tree instead of on our chess piece. Yeah, that kind of is how the tree goes. Moving on to skills. In our helmet, we're running a... Now, okay, so right now my helmet is not fully upgraded, although it's dang near close. There is a mirrored version that's probably better than the one I have, but I just haven't gotten around to getting it yet. But for now, my helmet is my Vengeance setup, in which I have Vengeance with Awakened cast on critical, Despair, and Hexbloom. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll run the setup, but they won't run Hexbloom. Instead, they'll run Purifying Flame. And the reason I'm not running Purifying Flame is because Purifying Flame is a boon for getting you killed in physical damage reflect maps. So not running Purifying Flame allows you to run Fizz reflect maps without really paying attention to it. Not only that, but Purifying Flame doesn't really provide much of a benefit. It's a very small AoE that it casts on, especially if you're running things like, especially when you're not running increased area of effect, you're barely getting anything off of that Purifying Flame consecrated ground because the target is so small. Enemies will typically move off of the consecrated ground before your Forbidden Rite even hits the enemy. So yeah, Purifying Flame just kind of feels pointless compared to Hexbloom, where if I cast Despair and then I don't get hit for a while, my Despair will carry out for longer duration to more enemies, especially in chain pack sizes. So for instance, it allows me to carry out a Despair curse throughout a pack in, say, a simulacrum way easier. So yeah, that's why I'm running Hexbloom in particular. In our weapon, we're running Valmolten Shell, which is our cast on walk, and then we're running a level 1 Clarity with Flame Dash. We're running Clarity specifically because of my Watcher's Eye, although certain builds will run Precision instead of Clarity, and then run the Precision-based modifiers on a Watcher's Eye. It really is based on kind of how much reservation you commit to in your tree. I do not commit a lot to my reservation. I'm not running any voice cluster jewels, so I don't have room for a lot of small reservation clusters. So therefore, I'm running Clarity to reduce the mana cost of all my skills, instead of, say, running a crit gives you flask charges Precision, which will keep your Dying Sun up a lot more often. But yeah, so that's why I'm not running Precision, I'm running Clarity instead. In our other weapon, so that was in our shield, but in our dagger, we're running Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, and Withering Step. Sniper's Mark is a great projectile damage increase for unique and rare enemies. And then Withering Step is the crux of our build. It grants us a ton of extra damage because it's a huge AoE withering effect ability, and we do stack Wither, and we do commit to Wither a lot in this build. So Withering Step also stays active while channeling Cyclone, which means we can, while spinning, cast it without having to break our Cyclone, and it will cast a big AoE for a short amount of time. It'll wither everything up to 9 stacks, and then we have a chance, because of our passive tree, to inflict up to 15 instead of 9. And you'll see at 9 wither stacks, our build is dealing 172 million DPS combined, but up to 15 it deals near 200 million. In our 6th link chess piece, we're running Cyclone, the Divergent version, so that we can have more movement speed. And then we're running Concentrated Effect. The reason I'm running Concentrated Effect over in Power is because of the way I have the build positioned. Since we have so much flat evasion, or since we have so much flat energy shield, we're able to stack a lot of base Forbidden Rite chaos damage, and therefore there is diminishing returns to levels, especially after you get Forbidden Rite to around level 30. It starts to have diminishing returns, and therefore Empower actually is a downgrade from Concentrated Effect in my setup. Then we have the Awaken Cast on Crit, which is level 6, and then we have the +1 to all levels, plus the +3 to all crit support gems in the tree, which gives us a level 10 Cast on Crit, which is exactly what we want. Then we have Anomalous Forbidden Rite, which I have upgraded to about level 30 because of our chess piece granting it so many additional levels, as well as some of the supports within the 6 link as well as on the tree. And then we have Awakened Void Manipulation, which is just more chaos damage. It's the best in slot there. And then we have Power Charge and Critical, which is the engine of our build and the engine of our 6 link. It allows us to stack power charges. In our boots, we're running Defiance Banner with Determination, Awakened Enlighten 5, and Tempest Shield. The way that this build is built out, there is absolutely no way I can run Awakened Enlighten, or there's absolutely no way I could run Enlighten 4s without taking the 12% reservation efficiency mastery on the tree, which means I would have to sacrifice about 22 million damage worth of chaos damage nodes to do that. So I have Awaken Enlighten 5s in order to mitigate me needing to do that. Then we're running Anomalous Defiance Banner. The Anomalous variant is just the best variant for what we're doing here. Level 21 Determination for extra armor, and then we're running a 2120 regular Tempest Shield instead of Divergent because we're already capped on spell block. And if we take away Mage Hunter and we put on Divergent Tempest Shield, we actually are not capped in spell block, so that's why we run the 2120 normal Tempest Shield instead. In our gloves, we're running Zealotry, Awaken Enlighten, Val Discipline, and Purity of Ice. We're running Anomalous Val Discipline because a lot of the time our build is actually at full energy shield. Since we block and regen and mitigate so much damage, we are consistently at max energy shield. And it's not like it goes down and up from 0 to 1. I'm telling you, the number won't change unless you take a nasty hit. So yeah, it's important that you run Anomalous because you do actually get a good benefit out of it. And I'm running the Val Discipline as you get the active, which just grants you basically a health potion for energy shield. So it's kind of like, why not? If you can't afford it, why not, right? Then we're running Anomalous Zealotry. We're running the Anomalous version because we get extra crit multi. It's just a no-brainer. And then Purity of Ice is the Purity max res that we're stacking and gives us most of our defenses. And that's kind of the skill setup that I've got for the build. Moving on to items. There's a lot to break down on the gear of this build. I'll start with the dagger that we're using. This is a dagger that I made myself. You can mirror it if you want to, although I'm charging a mirror fee until I recoup some of my investment, and then I will make the mirror fee free once that happens. But yeah, until then, there is a mirror fee, yada yada. That's not the point of this video. But basically, it's an explode with spell DD and increased chaos damage implicit. Imperial Skein with attack speed, crit chance, crit multi, +1 to all level of chaos spells. And hits can't be evaded, which is allowing us to get basically 100% hit uptime, which means we can calculate our trigger rate way easier because our hits cannot be evaded. On the Crucible tree, we have increased spell damage with global max energy shield, +1 power charge, culling strike against rare or unique enemies, aka marked enemies, and then spell crit, because our build actually does have a bit of trouble capping out on spell crit, although with 0.6% flat spell crit, we cap pretty much no problem. Moving on to the Aegis. Since Crucible Trees has come out, the double corrupted Aegis is no longer best in slot. Instead, we take a extra flat energy shield with max cold res and max power charge, and then chance to avoid being shocked. It is crucial that I have these nodes in particular. I mean, they all are hugely beneficial to my build. So that's why I run the Aegis Aurora, not double corrupted. If I'm a mad lad, I could go double corrupted, but I'm just not that psychotic. So That's not going to happen. But yeah, that's the tree. I chanced it myself. It was a pain. It took me 2 days of nonstop chancing to get it, so in case you were wondering. The helmet is just a Forbidden Ray fires an additional projectile with int. We stack int wherever possible. Wherever we have an empty open suffix anywhere in the build, we just stuff intelligence into it because that gives us extra energy shield, which is just greatly beneficial. And then this is the elevated chaos resistance plus max power charge awakened slammed helmet. I mean, it's just like the general Forbidden Rite double influenced helmet that you can get. There is a mirror helmet that's probably better than this. You lose the minus 12% to chaos resistance node, but you do benefit because you get a ton of added defenses as well as some extra gem levels and increased aura effect. So there is a lot of utility that's added on top of it. Plus you get to keep the max power charge in the helmet because of the synth mod, so it's technically better to get the mirror helmet. I just don't have it yet. Then we're running a Skin of the Loyal. I'm running a 3 green, 3 blue with plus 2 AoE, plus 2 projectile, which is giving us 4 additional levels on our Forbidden Rite, as well as giving us a few extra levels in concentrated effect. So there is some benefit there, but yeah, plus 2 AoE, plus 2 projectile is best in slot for Forbidden Rite in particular. Now, don't be fooled. If you go into the PoE and you experiment, you'll notice that Awakened Greater Multiple Projectiles looks like it's supposed to be really good for this build, but trust me when I say this, it's not. And that's because you can pretty much only hit a target up to 5 times overlap on Forbidden Rite. So if you overdo it on projectiles, you get diminishing returns. PoE just doesn't calculate for that. Yeah, that's why we don't run GMP, and that's why we don't run +1 to all levels or whatever. That's why we're running plus 2 to AoE, and that's why we're running concentrated effect. For the gloves, we're just running a fractured ES base with some int, +1 to AoE gems, so that we can get the additional 1% max cap res from Purity of Ice, as well as a few extra little benefits from our other auras in the gloves. We're putting in 18% exactly attack speed, and the reason is because that is capping out our trigger rate. Without this 18% increased attack speed, our trigger rate goes down pretty dramatically, and if you remove this attack speed plus some attack speed on the tree and you run an onslaught flask, it is very hard to balance that. I couldn't figure it out without completely flipping my build over, so yeah, we're running attack speed in the gloves instead. And then we're running Eldritch implicits, so we're running increased effect of your marks plus Unnerve, which Unnerve is very good with the belt enchant for this build. For the boots, we're running cooldown recovery plus Tailwind. 20% cooldown recovery on boots it's a crux to the build. It allows you to cap your trigger rate. Again, very, very, very important to get this. And then we have Ashling move speed plus reduced mana cost of skills, which is super important if you've been hit recently. Now, it's super important in my build in particular because my max unreserved mana is 10. So I do have regen to sustain for a little while, but when I take a hit, it makes everything in my build cost 0. When it's not up, everything in my build costs 1 mana, and I would need to remove this enchantment from my build. I would need a 2% reduced mana cost synthesized jewel. Now that's like the only way I could pull it off, but for now this is what I'm doing because I synthed I think like 40 cluster jewels and I didn't hit it, and so I gave up. But yeah, that's why that enchantment is there. For our amulet, we're running +1 to level of all, +1 to level of all chaos, and then crit chance, chaos damage, crit multi, increase maxed energy shield with allocates charisma, and then some stats that we need to fill requirements. This is generally like a pretty good amulet. I don't know if it's best in slot. There's probably a few things that are slightly better in slot than this is. Counting, I think one of these mods is a tier 2 mod. I think my crit multi is a tier 2 mod, not a tier 1. So It's not perfect, but it also only costed me 40 divines, so can't really go wrong with that. And then for our rings, for running the mirrored Rune Whirl Moonstone Ring, crit multi-max power, spell damage per power, and then strength and int. This helps with our strength requirement, and then also gives us a 110 added intelligence, which is a ton of energy shield, which is why we run this over the over the strength dex ring, and then we just try to make dex work in our tree, which I have done by basically max rolling a mageblood. But yeah, so, and then we have crit multi, max energy shield, reduced mana cost of skills. This is a ring that was made for this build, so yeah, we buy this ring, we get a Calandra's Touch, we wear 2 of the rings. For my belt, I'm running a mageblood. I'm running a plus 60 to dexterity mageblood with 4 flasks, and then chance to unnerve, or increase spell crit to enemies who are unnerved. So very helpful for getting that spell crit kind of up there towards the cap. And then for our flasks, alongside the mageblood, we're running a bismuth, quicksilver, granite, and diamond flask with increased armor, additional elemental resistances, reduced mana cost of skills, and increased movement speed. Movement speed is pretty important in this build. Of course, it has diminishing returns. Eventually, you get to a certain point where it doesn't really matter how fast you're going, unless you're making the build primarily for mapping. But if you are doing the build primarily for mapping and you don't care about your single target damage at all, and you want a lot less damage, you want to lose out on a power charge, you can go the Rampage Dagger. But yeah, I would suggest only running the Rampage Dagger if you're doing something like a lot of delving, and even then, I don't even know if I would suggest it for delving, because you might not be able to handle the all boss fight as easily, since Rampage does nothing in boss fights. So yeah, something to think about. But yeah, moving on. Then we're running a Dying Sun with 40% less duration, which is the important part, but then we also want a high amount of increased area of effect so that we can get Forbidden Rite area damage to hit a larger area, especially since we're running concentrated effect. We want to make sure we're scaling the area of effect as much as we can, wherever we can. And yeah, that's kind of the build, guys. I know this was a bit of a long-winded build showcase. I had a lot to talk about. I'm obsessed with this build. I love this build to pieces. This build, in my honest opinion, is the best all-around quality of life build that you can make in the game. Not only is it great for any content you throw at it, literally anything this build will do with no problem. I have tested this build in 100% delirium mega juice maps. I have tried this build in Wave 30 simulacrum. I've done every single Uber boss on this build. I'm down to like depth 650 right now in Delve. Yeah, this build is phenomenal at all content. And not only that, but this build feels amazing to play. It's got such a nice feeling playstyle. And I think that's why people will spend so much currency on the build, because it really is the best feeling build in the game, in my honest opinion. But yeah, that's Forbidden Rite Cast and Crit, guys. This is what rich people spend all their currency on. Builds that just feel good and can do whatever they want it to do. I'm going to play this build until the league ends. Yeah, that's about all I got to say, guys. Again, long-winded. Bit of a weird day for me today. But yeah, if you liked the video, like and subscribe. Hopefully you enjoyed the content that I showcased of the build. And I'll see you later. All right.